Do you not say the performance on the field is concerning in the way that they're tactically set up was a failure by Bruce by not starting a back three and how they looked in Mexico, where you're like, wow, this team actually clicks. And then you're at home against Costa Rica, and then suddenly it just kind of the pairing of Tim Ream and Jeff Cameron was an absolute disaster. Would you not say it's concerning on the premise of how they've performed, not based on the result?
I mean, I think I did say it was concerning. I just don't think that the sky is not falling. You know, I think there's a line between being critical and saying, oh, this is the worst team in the world. Bruce Arena, fire Bruce Arena, bring back Jurgen, bring back Bob Bradley, kill everyone. I think there is a balance. You can say that there were some mistakes. I mean, there is a question about whether Tim Ream was there, but also Tim Ream played, he played in New York. He knows that game. He has played well in Europe. I thought Jeff Cameron, that was the worst individual game I've ever seen him play, but that's not a formation thing. That's just sort of an abnormality. I mean, I don't think that he's going to have another horrible game like that. And there's also nothing in his play at Stoke that would cause me to think that would have happened before. And like I said, again, I think they probably, if that exact same game happens against Costa Rica 10 times and everything shakes out as it does, they probably win that game 7 times. If they call that penalty against Altidore early on, then it's probably 1-0 US, and that totally changes the game. If Navas doesn't make that ridiculous save on Pulisic's shot late in the game, it's 1-1, and then we're having a different conversation. I agree with you guys that the Honduras performance, if anything, even though the result was better, the performance was more concerning. But I don't think that it's time or necessary or smart to write this team off or write Arena's tactics off and kind of forget about what happened in the 8 months prior when people were pretty excited about what was going on. And I don't think Arena had been perfect then either, but he certainly, pulled a lot of the right levers and then just got some things wrong in these last 2 games. And also the results didn't follow. So I think there's a lot of different things going on, and it just sort of, I think the U.S. fans and some of the media is kind of prone to hysterics, which is fine, and it's fun, and it makes people talk, but I don't think that that's actually what the reality is.
I mean, it's interesting because you have a lot of sides saying it was a great draw, it was a good performance. I mean, I feel like sometimes the media isn't as harsh on Bruce as they were on Jurgen. I know it's a common opinion. I've seen it online. I know people say that's not true. They're equally as harsh. I think my thing is it was. I'm not even a Jurgen fan. I wanted him fired. I mean, that let's be honest. He loved the team and he had the team. It was just disaster. But I just thought that like some of the media were spinning it. They were saying it was a good draw, it was a quality draw, and like I said, I thought the result was good, but I thought the performance was bad. And I mean, I didn't really see anyone. I saw some people criticize performance, but I didn't see many, to be honest. And I don't think that we should be satisfied with that performance. But I felt like the media was okay with it. They're just like, yeah, it was a good performance. Do you think there's like a different media coverage of the team with Bruce on the rum instead of Klinsmann, maybe like a looser scope?
Not entirely, no. I mean, I'd encourage you to go back and read the coverage of Klinsmann for the first 18 months or so, and I think it was, by and large, very positive, and I think he got, not everybody, but I think he got,
absolutely.
I think he got a lot of benefit of the doubt, too, and I think, frankly, that's helpful for a new coach, because, coaching a national team is a weird thing. It takes time. You don't see these guys very much. And I think the worst thing you can do is, do what Mexico has done in the past and has now gotten away from a little bit, to their credit. But, where you get a string of 3 bad results or, a couple of months that are bad and you fire the coach and then you move on to another coach and you play in and the media goes crazy. And so, I mean, I think, are there times where people are maybe not as critical of Arena as they could be, or coming out of that draw, could someone, could you be 5 or 10% more critical or whatever you want? I mean, sure, but that's a level of degrees. I don't think that there is the narrative of Bruce gets a pass where Klinsmann didn't. I think is just not true based on the first kind of year, 18 months or 2 years of Klinsmann's tenure. I mean, once everyone turned, they turned pretty dramatically, and in some ways, kind of forgot about. We're not able to see anything good that he did. So it went both ways with Klinsmann, I think. But I think Bruce is still in that not a honeymoon phase, but he's not getting a free pass. I mean, he's maybe some people are a little bit less critical than they might otherwise be. But they're like the dogs. But no, I don't think that there is he's not getting a free pass in a way that Klinsmann did. I just don't think I see where that argument is coming from, but I just don't think it's true based on being around the first couple of years of Klinsmann's tenure.
No, I mean I think it's an interesting division between Klinsmann and Bruce Arena. This is Bruce Arena's second term, so we know what he's used. We're used to seeing him at the helm of the U.S. men's national team. I think it's easy to sum it up because the U.S. men's national team is going to qualify for the World Cup. That's not the fear. My fear is that we're still, get to the group stage of the World Cup, maybe get out of it, and then are we ever going to build onto a deeper run in the World Cup? That's my concern. It's not that we're panicking here. My concern is what are we going to look like in Russia? Because as the team develops, what has changed over the last 15 years when it comes to the global stage of U.S. soccer? Yes, MLS has grown, but MLS is its own entity. We definitely appreciate you joining us. Noah, where can we find you? Where can we find your content?
My Twitter feed is at Noah E. Davis. American Soccer Now, ESPN FC, and The Ringer primarily where I'm writing these days.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we hope to talk to you down the road.
Definitely. Thanks so much, guys.
Absolutely. Listeners, follow us on Twitter at UncSamSoccerPod. Noah's fantastic guy. A lot of knowledge. In fact, Armand was disconnected there for a little bit, huh?
Yeah, dude. I was knocked out of the conversation for a solid couple of minutes. I mean, but it was still a good conversation. I really liked what Noah was saying. I thought it was a really interesting debate that we had.
He seems very fair, and it's kind of hard to judge somebody he comes across as very fair. He's just it was bad 2 results, no question about it.
Which is kind of hard to see in the U.S. soccer media. In the U.S. soccer media, I feel like it's kind of hard to find someone that was fair.
Absolutely.
He is relatively fair. He's not radical on either side.
No, he's not. And we would have to, have a longer conversation with him to really know, what his opinions are on Bruce Arena and the players. But he understood that the result was bad, and the point in Honduras was very significant. I think. Now, let me ask you, Honduras, Costa Rica, what game did the United States perform better at?
I would say Costa Rica, because the Honduras game was an absolute disaster for 83 minutes.
Yeah, and yet they lost. And in the Honduras game, they got the point. So that's soccer. That's just the nature of the game. You could have a really poor performance, but you can still get something out of it.
Exactly. It's a beautiful game.
Yeah, it is a beautiful game for that reason. But I think he misses one small point, and it's not to belittle him or his coverage or anything, but my whole argument with the national team is we haven't changed in 15 years. We're still going to get to the World Cup. I don't think there is zero chance that we miss out on this World Cup. Okay, we are in a good region of soccer in the sense that it's pretty easy to get out. The Hex is very forgiving, but in the span of since 2002, Armand, what has changed with this national team?
I'm listening.
We made it to the quarterfinals, right?
Right.
And since then, we haven't done anything. So it's
our coach is the same.
The coach is exactly the same, and I want to remind listeners, just remember Mexico, who had in the 2014 round of qualifying, was a disaster for them. Remember, they almost missed out on the World Cup until Zusi scored. And They won the playoff, and then they looked good. Ochoa made himself into a statue, taking care of Brazil. Do you remember that game? And then
yeah.
And then you had the debacle at the end with the penalty on Robin in the round of 16, and then it's all that. But the U.S. round of 16 lose to Ghana. Okay, cool. Expectations. That's it, right?
Yeah, basically.
But I want to ask you, what the U.S. media is like. There's a debate going on. How do you assess this national team? Who is it? On ESPN FC, now I'm forgetting his name. Craig Burley.
Ian Dark
and Craig Burley both think they're average, and then Ian Dark says what? Below mediocre?
Yeah.
Thought?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to side more, I would say, with Ian Dark at the moment. The team isn't looking that well. I feel like we're just going back in time with the tactics and whatnot. And that's not to say the team hasn't looked good. The team has looked impressive. I mean, I constantly look back at that Mexico result, that beautiful execution of a 3-4-3, beautiful game. And I thought it was a fantastic tactical thing by Arena. And that's when I thought, okay, it's going to change. Arena did something brilliantly tactically, and the team looks good. But we're looking at it now, and I feel like we're back to like where we were. I think the USA is good enough to get out of the CONCACAF, but I don't know if they're good enough on the national stage or the worldwide stage. If that makes any sense. You look around on the side. I really don't think. Hopefully during World Cup time this doesn't happen, but I really don't think Graham Zusi is a starting right back. I don't think DeMarcus Beasley should be the starting left back for the national team. Even though I thought Bruce would start him, I don't think he should be the starting left back. It's just things like that. That just like we haven't stuff hasn't changed since like what 06, 02 from then. Like I feel like I don't know. It's interesting because the USA doesn't have that high of expectations. You know what I'm saying, Steven?
Well, that's the thing is, what are we expecting this national team to do? And then Noah hit it on the dot. The U.S. fan base swings without actually looking at the performances.
Crazy. It's bad.
It's based on a result. And I'm like, that's just not fair because you have to look at the way in which they played. A team could lose, but you say, you know what? They played well, and you can't complain about that. Or they played solid, and you're like,
right, what? Exactly.
A great, sometimes soccer is, divided by inches, and somebody scores a fantastic goal that the keeper has no chance of saving, and it's from 30 yards out, and then there you go. What are you going to do to that? What are you going to say to that? But yeah, the thing is, we need to understand as a soccer nation, what is the expectation of this team? If you live in Germany, yes, it is to win the World Cup. If you live in France, now it was, in 2016, it was to win the European Championship. But if you're Poland, yeah, quarterfinals of the Euros, that was the expectation. If you're Switzerland, the quarterfinals, which they failed to get to, that was the expectation. And it was, it was disappointing. Italy, for example, it's a perfect example. Soccer nation, 4-time World Cup champ. They got, to the quarterfinals, losing to Germany on penalties in 2016 at the European Championships. But that was a successful tournament because they played so fantastic. It captured the nation. It captured people's hearts and soul and passion. But the U.S. national team, what are we expecting them to do? And I think it is to qualify for the World Cup. And if they get to the World Cup, what are we complaining about? Why are fans so, up in arms or swinging left and right? I mean, the U.S. could win the next 2 games 3-0 each game, and everything is awesome. Woohoo, USA! Woohoo! And we would forget about these 2 terrible performances.
Absolutely, Steve. I think you hit the hammer on the head. I think an expectation of just making the World Cup should be good enough for this country at where we're at in soccer development. I don't think it's a lot. I mean, a lot of countries just get to the World Cup. It's a really exciting time. I don't think USA should disappointed if, like, they don't win the World Cup. That's an unrealistic expectation. They're not going to win the World Cup. Yet, I mean, I think the U.S. is good enough to get out of the group stage if they go to